Okay, so I appreciate you guys with those messages there. I was gonna reschedule this, but I'm a little late to it. I honestly kind of forgot I made this, a schedule for today. I thought I had tomorrow, maybe that I was gonna do it, but then I realized I have a flight as well. Um, so no, I'm just gonna go ahead and start now, and so we're gonna first go to a certain document, and it's called "The History of the Protocols" by Oleg Plantinov. So here's the notes. It says this is a text is a modified machine translation of the Russian original, lacking the footnotes and other scholarly apparatus. Though that certainly renders this text a poor imitation of the original, it is nonetheless an important work whose content is unheard of in the heavily censored English-speaking West, because a formal translation, unlikely due to censorship and corresponding lack of financial incentive, this text will have to do. Though the author seems to receive heaps of abuse in the form of, quote, anti Semitic and the like, the text seems both sober and dispassionate. It is hoped that the reader takes it seriously without fanatical obsession. The reason man falls prey to the wiles of the enemy of Christ is not merely because of the J's it upon him, but because he loves sin and readily enslaves himself to it. If one gets angry at the state of the world, he would do well to turn his anger on his own passions, and thereby thwart the machinations of the enemy of our salvation. Okay, so this is sort of a, uh, you know, an English translation of a Russian text. I have the Russian text and a machine copy of that as well. This seems to be, um, I don't know which one's better. I might read that one as well. I don't know. Uh, you know, maybe another time or now. I don't know. So we'll see how it goes. So it says the protocols, the secret program for the destruction of the Christian world, is the most terrifying and mysterious document in human history in terms of mass circulation. The Protocols is the second only to the Bible and works of Lenin, becoming one of the most read of books in the 20th century. This secret document was first published in Russia. It appears to our country it is explained by the miracles of God's mercy to the Russian people who did not notice the dangers hanging over them by the builders of the New World Order, for the quote chosen people. Many Russian people possessing the Orthodox consciousness immediately saw in the protocols not just a political document, but a religious warning about the triumph of the Jays or the coming Antichrist. The publication of the protocols in Russia was not of a political nature. It was not aimed at confrontation with any people, but at the fight against the coming Antichrist, the forces of evil, Satanism. That is how the Russian, excuse me, the Russian saints and ascetics of the 20th century, who blessed its publication and distribution in Russia, understood its meaning. The publication of the protocols in the book Essay Nihilist, The Great and the Little, was blessed by the great Russian saint and visionary St. John of Kronstadt. Without the spiritual support of St. John of Kronstadt, the Nihilist book would not have been seen the light of day. As a contemporary notes, Nihilist himself did not believe in the possibility of readers' interest in his books. Under the influence of such despondency and pessimism, he might not have written his famous work. But it was in order to remove this obstacle that the wonderful visionary St. John confidently calls him to the task. Quote, write your books. Uh, right, your books will be bought and read. These words were said in February 1906 when a revolutionary darkness and a storm covered all of Russia. That's a gracious and powerful word. St. John's support and his example of what's subordinist in the work of Nihilus, without which the work itself would undoubtedly not have appeared. St. John of Kronstadt treated Nihilus and his faithful assistant and wife with warmth. Tell them, he said to his spiritual daughter G. Lobovikov, that quote, I love them strongly. I read his works with great pleasure. His works are a pure diamond. Tell him, said the saint to the same Lobovikov, that quote, that I deeply, deeply respect him and love him with the love of his brother in Christ. Uh, we got G. Lobovikov asked St. John to bless them, to which he took off his hat, crossed himself, and said, God will bless them. Uh, G also told St. John that St. S.A. Nihilus had written 3 more notebooks and would publish them, to which St. John replied, Tell him he should publish it, then send it to me to read. The priest of martyr Vladimir, Metropolitan of Moscow, and Kolomensky during the difficult times for Russia in October 1905, ordered all the Russian churches to read the homily composed by his hands. Quote, What shall we do in these troubled days? In the homily, in this homily, the holy martyr told the Orthodox people of Moscow about the criminal anti-Christian intentions of the compilers of the protocols. Quote, Their main nest abroad, reported the Metropolitan of Moscow to the congregation. Quote, They dream of enslaving the whole world. In their super secret protocols, they call us Christians straight cattle, which God has given, they say, a human image, only so that they, supposedly the chosen ones, do not hate us to our services. With Satan's cunning, they catch people in their nets, frivolous, fervilous, promise them an earthly paradise, but carefully hide from their hidden goals, their criminal dreams. By deceiving the poor man, they push him to the most terrible crimes, supposedly for the common good, and really turn him into an obedient slave. They try in every way to wipe him out of his soul, and at least to twist the holy doctrine of Christ. The word of Metropolitan Vladimir, read out in Moscow churches and sought after evaluation of the protocols, made a strong impression of the Orthodox people. The Vladika himself spoke this homily in the Assumption Cathedral of Moscow in the Kremlin. In asserting the protocols, Metropolitan Vladimir directly associated the master plans of their authors with the revolutionary events in Russia, but considered the resulting turmoil not from political but from a religious point of view, therefore calling on Orthodox people to fill their duty to God, to battle the Antichrist. Archbishop Nikon, another prominent Orthodox hierarch of the time, also considers the protocols of Zion from the same position, and as it follows from his diaries, the protocols stand in a direct connection with the mystery of iniquity, the case of the Antichrist, and the essence of the fruit of the work of the son of Satan, which is mentioned in Apocalypse 2:9, referencing the protocols. Uh, Saint Nikon wrote, quote, Is it possible not to come to conclusions that this is really not the work of one person, and the work of not even one generation of the enemies of the church, cunning, evil, among whom were the people of exceptional intelligence and strong will? People would not have a single spark of Christian morality, ready to do anything to achieve their goals. And their goal is to establish a world kingdom under the leadership of their king. All this is very similar to the cherished dreams of the Jays of their world king, and according to the teaching of the Holy Fathers, the Antichrist. The protocols are imbued with a Jayish spirit, a Jayish ideal. On the other hand, a dark jet of Buddhist delirium flows in the same direction in order to further disturb the course of human life. A strange thing. The ideals of Buddhists are somehow intertwined with the ideals of the Jays. What would seem to be common between a Jay and a Buddhist? But they go hand in hand with a common goal. It is clear that they share a common leader, the enemy of God and men. It is he who prepares the way for his betrothed, the Antichrist. The selfless work of S.A. Nihilus was blessed and supported by the holy Optina elder Barsanuphius during 1907 through 1912. The saint of Otto was a confessor of nihilists, sharing with him his position expressed in his comments on the protocols. For his commitment to the struggle against Jayish ideology, the elder was persecuted and eventually forced to leave the desert of Optina. Shortly before his death, the holy elder Barsanuphius, quote, conveyed their earthly worship to nihilists, saying that they had suffered with him for the same thing. During his 5 years in the Optina desert, until his forced departure in 1912, S.A. Nihilus enjoyed the spiritual support of the monastery's brotherhood, who considered him a great spiritual writer and visionary. The holy elder Joseph gave Nihilus his blessing. S.A. Nihilus spent many hours talking to future elder Father Nectarius and other famous Optina ascetics. While working on these essays, I managed to find many previous unpublished documents and materials on the history of the protocols, which were kept in the archives of Russia and the United States. Of particular interest are the materials of the Berne trial of these protocols, as well as the correspondence from participants in the trial confirming that the testimony of witnesses and experts who challenged the authenticity of the protocols had been falsified and prepared by a Jayish organization. The author thanks all those who contributed to the research for documents and materials. The author expresses his special gratitude to the curators of the Military Archive of the Russian Federation, GARF, the Center for the Storage of Historical Documents Collections, CHIDC, and the former Special Archive of the USSR. The Archive of the Holy Trinity Monastery, ASTM, Jordanville, USA, the Hoover Institution Archive, AGI, Stanford, USA. Okay, so how's everybody doing? I hope you guys are alright. It's pretty late tonight for this one. Um, um, what's up, Germanus? Okay, so here we go. Chapter 1. It is time for the protocols to appear. Eyewitness testimony from Papias circles. What is it? Papias? Papias? I don't know what that. The testimony of Russian immigrants. Messages from Zionist delegates. S.C. Efren and A. Nasiga. Uh, the Masonic book, quote, The Sacred Blood and the Holy Grail, published in London in 1982, claims that the protocols was first seen in 1884 in France. Quote, in the hands of one of the members of the Masonic Lodge, which belonged to Papias. Papias. Yeah, I guess that's how you say it. The author does not name the source of his information. They are apparently Masonic legends. Freemasons, probably deliberately, do not indicate the name, or the name of the Masons in whose hands the protocols were seen. Leslie Fry, a French researcher of the protocols, cites the testimony of people who lived in Odessa in 1890, claiming to already have seen the protocols. Both of the above evidence is very vague. They do not reveal names or specific circumstances and should therefore be taken with caution. I managed to find some more concrete evidence of the protocols in the archives of the prominent figures of the Russian monarch movement. N.F. Stepanov, Savitskov, Count I.S. Linsky, and General A. Stefanov, kept in the Holy Trinity Monastery, Jordanville, USA. All these sources indicate the appearance of the protocols in Russia most likely dates back to the mid 90s in the Cherny district of Tuluk province. These places are very, very familiar to me. For many years, I lived there in a cottage near Chernia. Epic Russian expanses, hills, beams, ravines, woods, shallow rivers are described in details by the great Russian writer I.S. Turgenev, whose family estate, Turgenevo, was located in Chernia, maybe. Many of the surrounding villages of the towns used to belong to Turgenev's ancestors. Numerous noblemen's estates spiritualized this land. Their owners were in constant communication with each other, and some were related by marriage. The soul of the Cherny district in the mid 90s was Alexei Nikolaevich Sukhotin, 1848 through 1903. The leader of the nobility of Cherny district, later Stavropol vice governor, who lived these years in his estate Medvedka, 2 miles from Cherny. It was Sukhotin who became the first reader of the protocols brought from France by a woman. Uh, uh, Sukhotin then passed on the protocols to his friend, military engineer Philip Stepanov, 1857 through 1932, head of the Moscow Kursk railway section. Married to Nadezhda Ivanov Rydelt. Stepanov's father was Peter Alexandrovich, an honored Russian general, command uh, commandant of the Tsarskoye Selo, a man close to the Tsar's family, who had a wide range of acquaintances in the higher spheres of society. Peter put the service of Russia and the empire above anything else, bringing up all his children in this conviction. No wonder it was his son E.P. Stepanov who was not afraid to take up the task of spreading the protocols through his hands. They dispersed throughout Russia. Below I will present the testimony of 3 witnesses, 2 and have never been published. Testimony of Philip Stepanov, counselor, chamberlain of the imperial court. In 1895, my neighbor, the retired major Alexei Nikolaevich Sukhotin, gave me a handwritten copy of, quote, the Protocols of the Sages of Zion. He told me that a lady he knew who lived in Paris found them at a friend's home, it seems A.J., and before leaving Paris, secretly translated them and brought this translation, one copy, to Russia, and gave this copy to Sukhotin. I first printed it in 100 copies on the hectograph, but this edition was difficult to read, and I decided to print it in some printing house without specifying the time, city, and printing house. I had help from Ippolovich Kalapovsky, who was then an official of the special order under V.G. Sergei Alexandrovich. He had then printed at the provincial printing house. It was in 1897. S.A. Nihilus reprinted those protocols completely in his essay. Philip Petrovich Stepanov, former persecutor of the Moscow Synodal office, chamberlain, acting counselor, and during this edition the head of the section of the track service in the city of Orlel. Moscow Kursk Yellow Yeldler. Yeldler. I don't know. I hereby certify the signature of the hand of a member of the colony of the Russian refugees of old and new Fatog, uh, chairman of the management board, colony's Prince Vladimir Golitsyn. Testimony of the Prince Vladimir Vladimirovich Golitsyn, nobility of the Moscow district, married to the daughter of V.P. Stepanov, Vera Filippana uh, Stepanovo. Oh, the first husband, Bos Disco. This stuff's crazy. So, in 1897, an unnamed lady uh, gave Alexei, the landowner of Tulalip country, leader of the Cherny district, later the Polish vice governor, the protocols in the form of a manuscript translated from a foreign language. This manuscript was composed of separate sheets. The lady received this manuscript abroad. In Sadokin directly gave this manuscript for distribution to his great friend and engineer Philip Petrovich Stepanov, at the time of the head of the Moscow Kursk railway section, later the head of the road, and then the chamberlain of the highest court, and the persecutor of the Moscow Synodal office. an honorary guardian of the Moscow presence of the Guardian Council, who died in Yugoslavia in Belgrade in 1932 during December 24th. Peace Stepanov during 1897-98, it is not known exactly, with the assistance of his friend Arkady Epololovich Kalapovsky, of an official of special assignments under the Moscow General Governor V.K. Sergei Alexandrovich, later governor of the Ufa, who died in Yugoslavia in 1922 through 1924, printed these protocols and several hundred of copies as manuscript in the printing house of the Moscow Governor General. The manuscript itself, as well as the warehouse of these brochures, were in the apartment of F.P. Stepanov and were distributed among friends. One of these copies was given by Stepanov to Sergei Yurovich Nihilist, the landowner of the Orlov Lip. Sergei Nihilist, after processing the protocols, added some of his own interpretations, published them together with his work, quote, The Great Within the Small, Antichrist, an Immediate Political Possibility, Notes of an Orthodox Believer in 1905. All this was recorded from the words of Prince Vladimir Volodymyrovich Golitsyn, member of the highest court and district leader of the Moscow district, married to the daughter of the above-mentioned F.P. Stepanov in Belgrade on November 13th, 1934. Recorded by Count Ilarion Sergeyevich Lansky, who lives in Belgrade. All the above testifies to the fact that in the question of the appearance of the quote protocols, it was certainly delivered from a secret source that revealed that the secrets of Jairy, out of fear of reprisal, the source wished to remain anonymous. There can be no question of any ulterior motives by the security department of the Imperial Russian Police, since all the participants in the first appearance of the printed quote protocols in Russia acted solely on their own initiative, having all the data from the unconditional belief in the authenticity of the main manuscript of the quote protocols. Note: the notes were made in the presence of F.P. Penov's daughter, who personally saw the first manuscript of the quote protocols and knew personally all the participants in the printing of the first quote protocols, and from A.N. Sukhotin and S.N. Sukhotin, a nihilist. Testimony. This a testimony from. Wait, is everybody good? How you doing? Yep. 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 Yeah. Truly. Yeah. I'm sorry. Well, man. I was an hour late, Isaac. I'm just letting you know, man. I got carried away and didn't wasn't watching the time. So sorry about that. So, anyways, it says testimony of Count Larian Sergeyevich Lansky, recorded by him in the third person. In Yugoslavia, it quote, in Yugoslavia and Banja Luka, a friend of Count I.S. Lansky, uh, uh, Manko Sukaya, I don't know how to say this, told him that her cousin Lutina told her in Futuga, Yugoslavia, in the presence of Count Lamdorf Galligan, that in 1896 or 1897 she saw an estate of Alexei Nikolaevich Sukhotin, quote, bears of the Tula Lip, as Suhotina's sister Varvara Nikolovna, in a gazebo in the garden, rewrote the manuscripts of protocols written in green ink. In addition to the above, there are several other evidence that the protocols were written out among the delegates to the First Zionist Congress in Basel in 1897, but not as a document, but as a pamphlet that some of the participants liked, reflecting their thoughts and aspirations. In 1996, I was told by an aged monk of the Holy Trinity Monastery, Jordanville, that he heard this in 1920s from a man named Ephraim. Anastasius Shatolov from New York testifies to this in more detail. Quote, many of us who were born in Yugoslavia knew about Sovye Konstantinovich Efron, one of the publishers the most famous in Russia. Quote, the Encyclopedia Brockhaus and Efren. He testified that he had personally participated in a meeting in Basel and that the quote protocols is indeed a note of the Zionists. Terrified by the meanness of the Zionist ideas, S.K. Ephraim left his organization and accepted Orthodoxy and lived piously. He died in the mid 1920s in a Serbian monastery of Petkovica at the age of 75 years old. At the age of 75. To this end, there is additional evidence from a participant in the Basel Congress or Basel Conference, Alfred Nossig, Zionist delegate from Berlin, and in 1901 he told the composer uh, Podgorevsky that between this 32nd and 33rd meeting of the Council of the Elders, T. Herzl read excerpts from the protocols. Wow. So I guess these were spoken at like a Zionist meeting, you know what I mean? In front of like a council of these people came together, like a Congress meeting of them. Uh, French origins of the protocols originally from a Masonic lodge, Rosenkreuzer's Memphis something Community of Zion. Analysis of the text of the Protocols of Zion leads to the conclusion that they were drawn up in France. All the main reality, facts, events, and even the turns of speech show that the document was forwarded in the French political environment. As it was rightly noted, quote, frequent references to aristo- aristocracy, to the Catholicism, to liberalism, to education, classical education, to the Republican regime and parliament, to the position of the press are quite similar to their position in France and are in no way similar to their position in Russia and Germany. Moreover, it seemed to me that the author is not familiar with the situation in Eastern Europe. Otherwise, he would have mentioned the rebukes usually made to jays in those countries. There are a jay in a kabbat and a loan shark, and he kills, as they say, with vodka and usury. According to the protocols, France will be the center from which the Jayish king and the world governed or govern mankind. The forms of government, at least in the first stages, were also proposed by France. The quote, Council of State says Protocol 2, quote, will appear as a vessel of the ruler's power. It will be like an ostentatious part of the legislative body, as it were, a committee of the editors of laws and decrees of the ruler. Here, the program for the new constitution being drafted will create law and law in court. 1. Under the guise of the proposals of the legislative body. 2. The presidential decrees under the guise of general regulations, resolutions, and the Senate and decisions of the State Council under the guise of ministerial resolutions. Forgive me. 3. And in the case of a convenient movement in the form of a state owned company. Despite the fact that the Protocols of Zion clearly define the Judeo-Talmudic racist, misanthropic principles of treatment of the quote unchosen gods, this document is in forms and is more Masonic than purely Jayish. Jayish leaders would certainly insist on establishing their historical forms of government and would never agree to establish a center of world government France nor Earth's Israel, according to J.S. expectations. The protocols do not make reference to the Torah, the Talmud, or the rabbinical literature, nor do they maintain Eretz Israel, Palestine, or Zionism. Nevertheless, the purely Jewish ideology and way of thinking in the protocols is everywhere. Protocol number 11, quote, God has given us his chosen people, scattering in this seeming weakness of ours for all our strength, and has effected which has now led us to the threshold of world domination. Protocol number 14, quote, when we reign, we will not want to have another religion except our one God, with whom our destiny is connected by our chosen one, with whom our destiny is united with the destinies of the world. No one will ever discuss our faith from its true point of view, for no one will ever know it thoroughly except ours, who will never dare to reveal its secrets. Uh, the last phrase seems to explain why the protocols do not discuss the Jewish faith and Talmudic concepts. The limited use of purely Jewish Jewish terms, names, and titles, and the presentation of the indigenous Jewish task indicates that the drafters of the protocol saw it as a transitional document, which was mainly available for the inspection in the Masonic lodges, not revealing all the religious tasks and secret intentions of Jewish leaders. The protocol served to promote the idea of conquering world domination among the spiritual allies of Judaism, i.e., Masons. It can be said without sufficient certainty that the protocols were created in French Masonic lodges. Working for several years in Special Archive of the USSR, which contained parts of documents of the Masonic orders of France, taken by the Soviet Army as a trophy in 1945 from Germany, where they were moved by uh, the guy in Germany with the H name. And I tried in particular to find any reference to the protocols, looking through much of the document of the quote, Great East of France and the Great French Lodge did not bring me to any new information. Apparently, neither the quote, Great East or of France itself, not the Grand Lodge of France, were directly related to the creation of protocols. However, in addition to an already named Masonic organizations and other organizations like the Rosenkreuz and the Order of Memphis Mitrium played major roles in France. The later, according to Masonic historian H. Skolster, was transferred to France in the early century by a Jewish merchant, Michael Bernarded, and here he, together with his brother Mark and Joseph, transformed the organization and expanded it. The ideologies of the order is based on a mixture of Judaism and paganism, and in particular the legend of Mitzrayim, son of Hama, who was to Egypt, took possession of it and gave it his name, Mitzrayim, the Jewish name of Egypt. Mitzrayim creates a secret mystical teaching based on the worship of Osiris, Iris, and other pagan gods. The political doctrine of this order was built on the foundations of the nation's secret power structure in order to establish the domination of others. The system order of Mitrium consisted of four series: symbolic, philosophical, mystical, and hermetic Kabbalistic. The system of membership and management of the order was very complicated. The series were divided into 17 classes and 90 categories. Members of the 87th and 90th class managed their first three series, reaching the 77th class. The Lord Prince of 78, led the fourth series. 90th class belonged to some unknown Supreme Lord. From the very beginning, the leadership of the order was associated with the revolutionary movement, and in particular with the Italian Carbonari. The Grand Master of the order, in turn, of Mazzini, Garibaldi, and Theodore Royce. Like um, Weishaupt and the Bavarian Illuminati, the Order of Mitzrayim claimed to lead the entire Masonic movement. In 1848, the order was closed by the police for its connection with the revolutionary movement, but during 1848, the revolution was revived again in Paris in its new form. Its members were divided in 90 categories of knowledge, divided equally into three series. In the higher esoteric classes were practiced the Talmud and Kabbalah. In 1851, the French authorities again intended to close the order. Its leaders moved the order to London. From there, Mitzrayim is founded groups in Belgium, Italy, Spain, Romania, Switzerland, in the United States, Australia, Germany, gaining a worldwide scope. In 1875, Mitzrayim merged with the sister organization Memphis, thus obtaining a double name. The activity of Memphis Mitzrayim was related to the personality of one of the main masons uh, hold on one second. Well, there is some in the South. The very first place I ever went, because I was living in Virginia, I went out to a little parish. It's called St. Sarah from the Saroff Orthodox Church, and it's under the GOCK. So that was a little true Orthodox parish out there. Um, to be honest with you, man, like if that's our own fault, really. It's we can't be like it's the church's fault that there aren't churches out there. It's like people need to start starting little house churches and missions where they are. We are the church, so if there's a lack out there, we got to fill that spot. That's what Christians are supposed to do. You know, everything, especially in this like kind of modern era, the way we look at things, it's like, why isn't something, because we don't have state funding. That's why, for one. We're not, there's not UNESCO sending us money, or the World Bank, or like some other crazy organization. Some of us, are starting little mission churches. For instance, I have one in Virginia. Like the guy had started it. It started out in his house, and then he eventually moved up and got a little lot of land and built his own church. Um, when this guy says non-canonical, let me explain something to you, man. Okay, being canonical doesn't mean to be in communion with every other group in the world that's under ecumenist hierarchs and a part of the World Council of Churches, which is given into the ecumenical movement where you accept Protestant baptisms. Um, True Orthodox are true Orthodox Christians. We come out of the catacombs church of Russia because the Soviet church were persecuting us. So no, we're not schismatics, and we're not a non-canonical group. What makes you canonical is following the canons of the Orthodox Church, which your jurisdictions do not do. So, anyways, in 43, the order was closed by the police for its connection with the revolutionary movement, but during the 1848 revolution, it was revived again in Paris. In its new form, its members were divided into. Oh, I already read this. Okay. Papias 1865 to 1960, beginning with the membership of the Theosophical Association in 1887. Papias soon creates its Czech Order of the Rose and the Cross. In 1891, he became a Grand Master of the Order of the Martinists, and in 1895 he became a member of the Order of the Golden Dawn. Later, Papias received a Grand Master's degree from the Temple of the Eastern Templar, the Memphis Mitrium system in France. Apparently, the Masonic authors of the book, quote, Holy Mystery, were referring to Memphis Mitrium when they claimed they had saw the protocols in 1884 in the hands of one of the members of the Masonic Lodge, which belonged to himself with the Papias and the great masters of which he became, not directly mentioning the name of the lodge. The Masonic authors clearly suggest that the same lodge was the place where the legend of Hormuz was proclaimed. The legendary Egyptian sage, the founder of the Order of the Rose and the Cross. Aware of the secret Masonic knowledge, the authors of the quote, Holy Mystery believe that the original source of the protocols of Zion was the ideology of the so called Zion community, which was founded in 1099 in Palestine on the hill of the Zion by King Gottfried of Bouillon, rather, head of the satanic order of the Templars, whose rituals included the worship of Baphomet. In 1188, the community of Zion broke away from the order of the Templars and began to exist independently, thus saving itself from the defeat of the Templars in the early 14th century. The community further activities were carried out in absolute secrecy. I'm starting to see why I'm having these a Templar, like from I guess he's like the highest Templar in Idaho or something, like come at me lately. Um, Among the secret members of the Zion community were Botticelli, Leonardo da Vinci, Newton, Hugo, and other of the sacred mysteries write, it seems that Zion dreams uniting church and state, bringing together spiritual and temporal, sacred and ignorant, religion and politics. According to the uh, Moravian, Moravian. This is how you say it. Yeah. Tradition, according to the community of Zion, the new king will, quote, rule but not reign but not rule. He'll indeed be a monarch, would mainly represent functions, while the political administration in the narrow sense will be entrusted to others. So in the 19th century, the community tried to create a new Holy Roman Empire, a kind of United States of Europe, a theocratic state that was both Habsburg and a radically reformed church. World War One and the collapse of the great European dynasties failed that plan. It should not be specified that the goals of the courts may be subject to serious speculation, but anyways, it would be a trans-confederation, a kind of modern empire, ruled by a dynasty derived by Jesus, endowed by temporal power. This dynasty would reign over the kingdoms and principalities, united by unions that form a kind of confederation, but not carried away by the inseparability of such a system. The assembly chosen by the people will take over effective governance of the European Parliament, which legislative and executive power. In analyzing the protocols of Zion and linking them to the community of Zion, the author of the Holy Mystery draw the following conclusion, quote, therefore, there is an original text that formed the basis of the official version of the quote protocols. This text is not apocryphal, but absolutely authentic. It does not reveal either Jayish thought or Jayish international conspiracy, but rather a Masonic organization, a secret society like it, which includes the word Zion in its name. 2. The original text on which the official version is based neither violent nor provocative in its expression is a program that mentions a broader power, the expansion of Freemasonry involving the establishment of social, political, and economic control. This program can also be applied to the secret societies of the Renaissance, the Society of the Holy Eucharist, or the Organization of Andre of Noldier. The original text on which the official version of the protocols is based fell into the hands of Sergi Nihilus. 4. The official version of the protocols of Zion sages, not being completely apocryphal, is likely a redrafted text, but behind these changes is on the um, something some passages of the Bible. One can find traces of the original text. The reference to a certain king, to the Pope, to an international church, or to Zion were probably not very useful to Nihilus, so he did not invent them himself. But since they were there, he had no reason to redact them. In short, if these footnotes meant nothing in the Jayish context, they regained their meaning in the context of secret societies. However, this is only one of several versions of the origins of the protocols that we will have to familiarize ourselves with. So we're on chapter 3 now. You talking about Roquar MP? Is the guy talking against? I'm not against Eastern Orthodoxy. No, I'm not against Eastern Orthodoxy. I would look into what true Orthodox Christianity is. We're traditional Orthodox Christians. That's it. We refuse to go with modernism. We refuse ecumenism. We refuse Sergianism. These are all concepts that we absolutely don't want anything to do with. True Orthodox Christians of Greece got their ordinations from Rokor. We were in full Eucharistic communion with them up until 2007, when along with the true Orthodox of Russia, Bulgaria, Serbia. We've all been in communion until 2007, when Rokor capitulated to the Moscow Patriarchate because the KGB infiltrated the hierarchy and subverted them into thinking that Mother Church was the Moscow Patriarchate, which it's really a church that was created by Stalin, with this Metropolitan Sergius as a puppet patriarch. Now, as far as the 1924 calendar change, that was caused by a British Freemason known as Meliotius Maltekis. He was sent there for the exact purpose of introducing a new calendar to have closer relations with the Anglicans and Protestants and the Pope and all these people in the West. And there was a movement all around the world that did not want to change holy tradition. The calendar was instituted at the very first Council of Nicaea, and it would take an equal council of that caliber to change a calendar. That council never happened. It was put in place by a heretic Freemason that's into the hierarchy. There's Freemasonry has infiltrated world orthodoxy, and we are those that have not gone along with the apostasy. So you're confused. Anyways, so chapter 3. Masonic Dialogue by M. Joly, Proximity of the Order of the Rosen Kreuzers, Textual coincidence of some pages of the protocols and the dialogue, the use of a common source, the tragic death of Joly. Okay, so it says the stalemate in the study of the protocols attributed to attempts to treat them as an authentic document of meeting, convention, or congress. Textual analysis of the protocols allows us to conclude that even if they were once official documents, they were heavily reworked with inserts and additions. This was proved by the results of comparison of the protocols with other similar documents, especially with the Masonic document, quote, Dialogue in Hell, between Machiavelli and Monte something. I can't read that name. A little known French lawyer of Jewish origin, Maurice Moses Joly Joel, drafted it in the form of a pamphlet against Emperor Napoleon III. The quote, dialogue was replete with gross insults against the head of the state, for which its author received 15 months in prison. Joly's book would probably have never been remembered if it had not been the textual similarity of some parts of it with the protocols of Zion. It's true that the thoughts were expressed in the protocols were clear and energetic, whereas Joly's work sounded sluggish and vague. However, there was a clear sense of a similar primary source in both documents. The secret appearance of the quote dialogue and revealed by the studying of the political biography of M. Joly. It turns out that this lawyer was a prominent member of the Order of the Rosicrucians, had executive connections in the Masonic lodges, was familiar with high-ranking Masons. The future president, the future president of France, the writer of Mason Hugo. In the late 60s, the confrontation between the Masonic organizations of France and Napoleon III was monumental. So he's talking about 1860s. So the Freemasons who brought Napoleon III to power in 1861 used him to follow their policies. That was clearly not his own interest. In addition, as wrote the historian of Freemasonry, Copin Albancelli, Napoleon III, quote, strongly refused to continue to further fulfill the Masonic desires in the relation of foreign policies of religion in France, and from that time begins its fall. The emperor included to put the Masons under his control. Uh, he intended. On January 11th, 1862, Napoleon did not replace the great master of the quote, Great East in France with a Freemason but a person close to him. Marshal Magnan, the new great master, enthusiastically began to eradicate Freemasonry. He restored to the balance the quote, Great East. Free suffrage and combined the quote, Great Lodge order with Mitrium. However, soon Magnan died, and the organization of Freemasonry again returned to its previous state. Nevertheless, such an attack on Masonry by Napoleon was not forgiven. A targeted press campaign is launched against the emperor, and there is an active intrigue in the elimination as a part of his campaign. The quote dialogue by M. Joly is published. Given that Joly belonged to the Masonic lodges, professed Masonic ideology and followed the Masonic discipline. His, quote, dialogue in context of the time was certainly the execution of social order, reflecting the views and positions and aspirations of Freemasons. It is almost certain that to fulfill this order, Joel Lee used documents and material obtained from Masonic lodges, and in his publication was approved by Masonic leadership. Therefore, it is not surprising that the ideologies of Joel Lee's, quote, dialogue so closely coincide with the racist and anti-human doctrine of the protocols. The similarities between some of the provisions of the protocols and Jolie's dialogue mostly end at Protocol 15. The author or authors of the protocols then engage other sources. And this is not surprising, whereas the previous protocols dealt primarily with the general principle of J's Masonic policy of conquest, retention of power. So since Protocol 16 had discussed this specific impact on different sectors, the population and spheres of activity, education and universities, advocacy, church and priesthood, protection of the regime and the fight against dissenters, finance, loans, budgets, currencies, as well as messianic provisions and the coming king of the Jays. A comparison of the protocols of Jolie's dialogue led to the conclusion that they contain the fundamental principles of Jay's Masonic mystery politics, where the protocols set out these principles by the Zion sages, rather. The dialogue by Machiavelli, Monte Cristo, that's how you say it, who's always been idols of Freemasons, the latter receiving one of the founders, the Masonic doctrine. It's obvious that Joe Lee couldn't have made this kind of work himself. Moreover, and most likely, the dialogue was not prepared for wide circulation, but for internal use among Freemasons. This, in particular, uh, explains the extreme rarity of Jolie's book, despite the fact that it was published in two editions in 1864 and 1868. The Masonic lodges often publish the books set out of their goals and in the guise of historical, philosophical, scientific publications, such as the book in Russia. It is the earliest 20th century, for example, was the brochure, quote, Italian Collares or something, which under the guise of a historical description of the charter, goals, objectives, and rituals of Russian Masonic lodges, which was part of the Order of the Great East and the peoples of Russia. Jolie's fate after the publication of the dialogues was tragic. After serving time in prison, he left abroad where he participated in Masonic intrigues to overthrow Napoleon III. The fall of the emperor in 1871 seemed to open up great opportunities for him. However, for some reason, he began to mop up his own comrades in arms. In mid-July 1878, he was found dead in his house. The official version was uh, he offed himself. So, anyways, so I hear that. Okay, so I'm just letting you guys know I'm not a World Orthodox channel. I'm a true Orthodox Christian. If you want to call us schismatics, I would say bring some proof and maybe we'll talk about it. I mean, I'll drop a link and we could talk about it if you wanted to. But the reality is, without any proof and just going with those narratives, you're just feeding into the propaganda of the ecumenists. That I mean, um, really, if we're schismatic, so were our saints. So stop venerating Father Seraphim Rose. Stop venerating St. John Maximovich. Stop venerating St. Philaret. Archbishop of Verki. St. Hieronymus of Mount Athos. There's so many. So, like, that's all I got to say, really. Okay, so we're on chapter 4. The coincidence of misanthropic ideology, secret JS, Masonic, and revolutionary organizations, comparison of the protocols of documents from the Illuminati, the Carbonari, and the alliance of the international bankers, our brothers. Okay, The unknown original source lies not only in the protocols of Jolly Lee's dialogues, but also in the documents of secret Masonic and revolutionary organizations. Um, Hold on one second. I'll look at something real quick and find out. Okay, never mind. Whatever. Okay. So it says, but also in the documents of the secret Masonic revolution organizations at the end of the 17th and 19th centuries. This evidenced by the large number of semantic and textual coincidences between them. The English historian Nesta Webster was the first to notice these amazing coincidences back in 1921. In her opinion, this quote confirms the theory of the protocols are based on earlier prototypes. Perhaps most coincidentally, the contents of the protocols bears marked similarities to the Order of the Illuminati, which was combined the features of the most demonic Masonic lodges and the Catholic Order of the Jesuits. The Illuminati's main goal was to destroy Christianity and establish a world republic, quote, without thrones and altars. To achieve these goals, the Illuminati permitted any means, even the most criminal and shameful methods: murder, intimidation, deception, blackmail, slander, bribery. The order organizer, Adam Weishaupt, preached Jaius ideas of special rights of the elect. The minority, private members of the order, knew only the nearest superiors, but none of their superiors. Secrecy was kept under the fear of death. Invisible superior officers could order a member of the order to commit a crime he had no right to disobey. Each member of the order was obliged to constantly denounce the other. Attempts to evade this were severely punished. Externally, by declaring the highest moral principles, the Illuminati committed the worst crimes, according to her the plans for the destruction of thrones. The Illuminatis organized the assassins of King Gustav of Sweden, participated in an intrigue that led to the execution of King Louis, and Marie Antoinette prepared the assassination attempt on Catherine II. Uh, the protocols have a significant number of similarities with the documents of the secret revolutionary movement of the Carbonari, associated, as I noted, with the Masonic order, the Memphis Mistrium. During the heyday of the Carbonari, their leaders also headed Memphis Mitrium. Mistrium. I want to see how I say this word. I think I've been kind of butchering it, so I'm gonna see what it actually means. Um, okay. I think it's Misrium. I don't know. It's bothering me though. Okay, it says, like the Illuminati, the leaders of the Carbonari, Mazzini, uh, Garibaldi, Sophie, and Bardini developed horrific plans to, quote, liberate humanity from monarchies and priests and build a world republic. The Carboni became true, quote, Knights of the Cloak and Dagger, constantly practicing brutal murder of their political opponents, intimidation, and blackmail. Carbonari collaborated not only with Memphis Mitrium, but also with the other Masonic orders, and in particular with the Grand Oriental Diatalia, uh, or the Grand Lodge of the Nations. In 1820, in Turin, under the auspices of Carboni, appeared another subversive Masonic association, the Triangle Lodge, which used the Savoy dynasty in the struggle for power. In order to revolutionize the masses, the Carbonians, like the Zion sages, considered it possible to inspire people with the lowest feelings to indulge in their vices, believing that afterwards they will become more malleable to their demagogical appeals. Okay, so the most famous figure of the Caparni movement was J. Garibaldi, 1807 to 1882. He became a Freemason in 1844 in the Lodge of the Shelter of the Valor, Brazil. While in the United States, Garibaldi joined the Luciferian American Freemasonry, actively participated in the work of the lodge, quote Tompkins number 471, New York, and he was a friend of the Mason Albert Pike. Returning to Italy in 1863, Garibaldi became head of the Supreme Masonic Council of Palermo in 1864. The Great Master of the quote, Great East of Italy in 1881, Garibaldi was elected head of the Order of Memphis Mitrium. Uh, in a letter to the Supreme Council of the Masonic Lodges of the Scottish Rite, written in June 11th, 1867, Garibaldi stated that the teachings of the great architect of the universe means the establishment of a world brotherhood between peoples. Later, in a letter addressed to the great master Mazzoni, Garibaldi compared the great architect of the universe with God of whom Mazzini speaks. In the same letter written in 1872, when the Internationalists began their subversion against the peoples of the world, Garibaldi said, quote, the working partnership, a Masonic organization, all his emblems are Masonic too. So why are the working congresses held outside the bosom of the founding organization that give birth to them? Doesn't democracy, i.e., the suffering classes, owe its existence to the organization that first proclaimed the slogan Brotherhood of All Workers? In 1867, under the leadership of the Great Master, the quote, Great Lodge of Italy, Garibaldi was created an international Masonic organization. He created one, the League of Peace and Freedom, which proclaimed the idea of the United States of Europe as the first stage of creating a world government. So the Antichrist is always going to, the spirit of Antichrist is always going to be in the name of peace. So it's the League of Peace and Freedom. The devil doesn't always appear with a red tail. So within the framework of this Masonic League, there is a secret organization, the Alliance of International Brothers, whose members were divided into 3 degrees of dedication. At the very top stood the quote International Brothers, who acted in complete secrecy. The quote National Brothers was subordinate to them. The members of the semi-legal, semi-secret organization, the People's Alliance of Socialist Democracy, were the lowest. The Masonic Alliance, which had branches in several European countries like the Illuminati or the Carbonari, combined the features of Freemasons and Jesuits, the Knights of the Cloak and Dagger. The Alliance of the International Brothers were headed by a supporter of the political banditry. Hold on a second. All right. Okay. So, we're on page 47 right now of this document out of 111. I'm not going to read it all, but I thought I would get it started. Um, the whole point of this show I'm doing, well, this reading here I'm doing, it's not really a show, uh, is to bring up the point. It is later than we think. Like these, this is Antichrist working in the world. Um, you know, Father Seraphim said something like, it's the end times of, the will be like the psychological trials of the dwellers of the end times will be close to that of the persecutions of the martyrs of the early church. I'm paraphrasing, but that's kind of what we're dealing with. Like you see, they'll pit groups against each other. They'll create groups and pit groups against each other. There's you know these groups are in control of the media. They're celebrities backing this type of stuff. These organizations are still existent. I mean, I'm sure most of us know it, but this isn't a conspiracy. That's the thing. It's a conspiracy in the sense that it's truly they're conspiring these things, but it's not a fantasy. Uh, and I would also like to point out that these people, in these organizations, these secret societies, are taught to lie about it, you know. So they're very subversive. They'll make websites with all these long polemics explaining that how they're not really what they are, but they are what they are, and there's no hiding it. It's absolutely. You know what that's from, Isaiah? I'll tell you. It's from look, just depending on appearances. So you can have the, gold on the cupolas and nice icons and all of that, but internally there can be a compromise, right? The body of Christ isn't of this world, really. It's a kingdom of God. We're trying to work for the kingdom of God. We're in the world, and the church is, uh, you know, uh, a physical place that we go, but we're also the mystical body of Christ. And if we're depending on appearances, we'll be led astray by the devil. And that's what's happened. You know, you go back to the iconoclast or the Arians, there were people that stayed with them too. And you know what happened to those people? They had to be, they had to return to the church. They had to be accepted back into the church. In world orthodoxy, they say, we're a parallel jurisdiction or something. To be a parallel, you have to be the same, right? And we're not the same as them. We hold to orthodox teachings. Their hierarchs hold to ecumenism. Their main teaching is that you can't break with heretics. If that was the case, then why did we break away from Roman Catholicism? Why did the Orthodox, not go to Arian churches? So you would go if you were in Rome, there'd be an Arian, Archbishop of Rome and an Orthodox Archbishop of Rome. Would that be considered a parallel jurisdiction? The way we look at this is there's a humanist, you know, church, and then there's the Orthodox Church. There's no in between here. You can't. What communion does light have with darkness? We can't be in communion with heretics, And they say, well, there has to be a council for the anathema, of 1983. No, it doesn't. That's not how anathemas work. You know, uh, that's how canons are applied. But not anathemas. Anathemas are, it's a um, concept where if you're preaching heresy openly and you expound these beliefs like these hierarchs are doing, like praying with the Pope and all these different things, and you stay under that person, your silence and being in communion with them means that you're falling under it as well. And you know maybe there's a possibility that some there that don't know what's going on might have grace if God is merciful towards them. But we can't be sure of that. That's why we're not in communion with them. we can be sure that there's grace in our mysteries because we're holding to have an orthodox confession of faith, and we're not allowing heresy in. I don't know. I mean, it's a huge topic. I mean, there's a lot of, there's a great book, The History of Resistance by Subdeacon Nectarius, that's just been released. I recommend reading it, because, historically, this has always been the case. If a heretic, ascended the top of a church and he was in control of the synod and he got all his people to sort of get around him, right? He put all his people in the synod and booted out any of the real Orthodox. What would happen was the Orthodox would leave those people and go and start their own Orthodox church from the ground up. Now, when they left them, are they leaving the church? No, they're leaving the heretics, right? Um, now, were there cases that, sometimes they would, the Orthodox would rise up and actually throw these people out of the church and put up an Orthodox bishop? Yes, that happened. Like, I think that talks about it in the Seventh Council. But this mentality that we have to wait for account, like as if the ecumenists are going to throw themselves out of these churches. That's naive. It's lukewarm to think that way. And we can't accept, this apostate. People, what happens is people get really comfortable. They get comfortable in going to their church and their priest and tea time, like having coffee hour, and you get to know all the people, and they'll die on that hill for all the externals. Like, that's not, if there's a compromise to Christ in what your jurisdiction is doing, and you're taking part of it and disseminating for it, and then pointing at actual Christians that are holding to a correct confession of faith and calling them schismatic because they refuse to be as lukewarm as you, there's a problem. Yeah. So I don't know. In 1867, under the leadership of the great master, the Great Lodge of Italy, Garbani was credited as an international Masonic organization. Yeah, we already read that. Sorry, my voice is kind of giving out. The Masonic Alliance had branches in several European countries, like the Illuminati Carbonari, combined the features of Freemasons and Jesuits. The Knights of the Cloak of the Dagger. Yeah, we read this. Okay. International Brothers were headed by a supporter of the political banditry and terror of bandit men, declared Buchanan an irreconcilable enemy of the state and the tire of social and Danish system established by the state. The head of the Alliance of International Brothers addressed his organization members, quote, "The generation should start a real revolution. This generation must start a real revolution and must destroy all the existing policies indiscriminately with a single thought. More and more, the form of banditry can be different. Poison, knife, hinge. Revelation sanctifies. Revolution sanctifies everything in this struggle. It'll be called terrorism. They'll give it a loud nickname. Let it be. We don't care." So, wow. All right, so I'm on chapter 5. I'm going to finish chapter 5. We're going to wrap this up, and then I'm going to come back with another episode soon on the same thing. So it says the appearance of the protocols in Russia, international misinformation for Khrushchev and Mishkov and Papias and Herzl, mysterious woman and the versions of abduction, uh, education. Yeah. Right. Okay. The history of the protocols in Russia is shrouded in a deep secrecy and full of contradictions. This is explained by the ominous nature of the document. Russian people who first managed to get it, not without reason, feared not only for their lives but also for the fate of their relatives and friends. The first Publishers International wrapped the source of its appearance in a fog of misinformation. The first publisher of the protocols, F. P. Stefanov, in 1895 and 1897, did not make any reference to the publication, and only 30 years later left a written certificate that he received them from the uh, Chernogorsk district leader of the nobility, A.N. Sukhotin, I don't know. The latter, as already mentioned in chapter 1, took them from a lady he knew living in Paris, who in turn found them via a Jewish friend. She then secretly translated them and brought them to Russia. It follows that the kidnapper of the protocols and its first translators are the same person. In 1903, the protocols were published in Russia in mass circulation, and the newspaper Simnaya, his publisher P. Khrushchevan, provided the publication with the preface, quote, from the translator, where he wrote, quote, the protocols are written by the Zion representatives. Do not confuse them with the representatives of the Zionist movement. And taken from the whole book of protocols, all the contents which could not be written because of the short time given to read them. Thus, as well as in the testimony of Stepanov, Khrushchevin, and the kidnapper of protocols, the translator speak in one person. Okay, so it seems someone's lying here. Who's lying? The most authoritative publisher of the protocols, S.A. Nihilus, gives two versions of the appearance in Russia. One, in the book The Great and the Little, Nihilus writes, in 1901, I managed to get at my disposal from a close person of mine. Now deceased, the manuscript, which was extraordinary clarity, depicts the course and development of the world's fatal mystery of the Jewish Masonic conspiracy, which has led to the apostolic world. Wait. He's talking about like the apostasy in the world to an inevitable end for him. The person who handed me this manuscript certifies that it is a copy translation of the original document, stolen by a woman from one of the most influential and most dedicated leaders of the French Masonry after one of the secret meetings, quote, dedicated somewhere in France. This manuscript, under the general title, quote, Minutes of the Meetings of the Sages of Zion, I suggest that those who wish to see, hear, and listen. 2. In the third edition of the protocols in the book, quote, close it is at the door. Yeah. But Nihilus puts it a little differently. Quote, in 1901, we managed to get one manuscript. This manuscript was titled Protocols and Meetings of the Sages of Zion, and handed over to me by late Chernogorsky, district leader of the nobility, later Stropol, vice governor Alexei Nikolaevich, and along with the way, Sikhotin told me that he, in turn, received this manuscript from a lady who lived permanently abroad, and that this lady, the Chernian landowner, and that she met her some very mysterious way. Sukhotin also said that this lady gave one of his manuscripts and something to administer the internal affairs of her return from abroad. That Sipyagin was killed afterwards. So that person that gave her the manuscript ended up getting killed, is what they're saying. Two more versions of the appearance of the protocols in Russia are connected with the name of Nihilus. One, on behalf of Nihilus, told by a certain Alexander du Chaillet, an adventurer and passerby who probably wrote it by order of the Jewish organization in 1921. Dushala wrote, I asked if through Mrs. K protocols have reached S.A. Nihilus. It seems strange to me that this huge, barely moving, broken by trials woman could ever penetrate the mysterious, quote, mysteries of Kagalaga of the Zion sages. Yes, she, Nihilus, Mr. K lived long abroad in France, there in Paris. She received this manuscript from a Russian general and gave it to me. This general managed to pull it out of the Masonic archive. I asked if the name of this general is secret. No, replied Sergei Alexandrovich. This general, Rashkovsky, a good, active man who did a lot in his time to show the pull strings of the enemies of Christ. This version, as we will see further, it is not supported by facts. One more version, expressed also on behalf of Nihilus, is based on a national legend. Sergei Alexandrovich wrote, quote, after the first of his books had been published, an old and poor lady who was a landowner somewhere in Oriol province visited. She asked if Sergei would dare to publish the protocols. They remained with her after the death of her son, who in turn received them from his wife, Ajay, who by some circumstances was in Paris. She was loved there by a Jewish girl who later adopted Christianity and married him. Oh, okay. She took the protocols secretly from the table of her father, who was one of the Zion sages, and gave them to her fiance, saying that they could be used in Russia. This version, too, is not supported by facts and is purely legendary. Later, Prince Indi Savokov managed to clarify some details of the personal testimony essay Nihilus. Prince Stepanov's daughter, Princess Via Golitsina, remembering what she had heard from her father, she claimed that the manuscript of the Protocols of Zion received by her father from an A.N. Sukhotin was in Russian, that the first edition on the rights of the manuscript without indicating the printing house where it was printed was also in Russian, that probably the manuscript received by her father was the original manuscript, which in Sukhotin received from an anonymous lady, and it is unknown whether it was previously translated into Russian from another language. That essay acknowledged received her father from the same Russian manuscript which her father had received from A.N. Sukhotin. The main conclusions when considering these versions are the following. The protocols were stolen from a secret Masonic vault. The manuscript of the protocols has been translated into Russian. The kidnapper and translator of the manuscript was a woman whose name was somehow hidden even in the 30s. According to Leslie Fry, a researcher of the Protocols of Zion, this woman was Juliana Justiniana um, Glinka, 1844 to 1918, the daughter of the former Russian ambassador to Brazil and Portugal. Wow. The maid of honor, the Empress Maria Feodorovna Fry, not bothering to refer to sources composing a real detective story with court intrigue. According to this story, Glinka was a secret Russian agent in Paris in 1884. She managed to gain access to the secret vaults of the Masonic Law's Mitrium. She bribed the member Short Shapiro, and he took the protocols out of the vault from 2,500 francs and let her copy them for one night. Having made a copy of the document, Glinka urgently left for St. Petersburg, where she handed it over to the generals, Orzinsky and Sherevin. To then he handed over to Alexander III. However, Sherevin, fearing the revenge of the Jays, was afraid to hand over the protocols to the Tsar. The Freemasons learned of the loss and began to pursue Shorts, who was forced to flee to Egypt. Uh, but the Freemasons found him there and killed him, so the French policy testified. Even under these conditions, Glinka does not lose hope of publishing the documents. She intercedes for it before the highest echelons of the empire. But the sages of Zion want to destroy the witness to their secret. There is an intrigue then against Glinka. In 1890 in Paris, a Russophobic book was published titled Holy Russia, Court, Army, Clergy, Bourgeoisie, and People. Over the over the cover was marked the name of the author, Paul Vasily. Alexander was told that this was in fact a maiden Glinka. Having acquainted himself with this really dirty book, the Tsar ordered the exile of its author to a family estate in the country. And later, in fact, the author of the Russophobic book was a French writer, Juliette Adam, who used the materials of Princess Demidova San Donato, Princess Radziwill, and the services of a Jewish writer, Ilya Zion. Uh, L. Fry's version is based on rumors and speculation and has little validity. It's quite true only of what relates to the release of the anti-Russian book by Paul Vasily and the indignation reaction of the Tsar Alexander III. The rest of the facts cited by Fry cannot be verified. In 1922, another version of the Emirates of Protocols in Russia was put forward by Colonel F. V. Winsberg. The Russian government, wrote Winsberg, quote, has known for many centuries that the bloody paths followed by the Jays. It knew who prompted the murder of its kings and dignitaries. It also knew that the Jays and Freemasons are actively implementing a plan to overthrow all the thrones and altars, partly implemented in the 18th century. Therefore, when it became known that Zionists in the fall of 1897 decided to convene a congress in Basel, or Basel, The Russian government, as we were told by a person who for many years held a prominent place in one of the ministries of St. Petersburg, sent there an agent. The latter bribed a Jay who enjoyed the trust of the Freemasonry's high authority, and at the end of the Congress was commissioned to deliver the reports of the secret meetings in Frankfurt from where the Jewish Lodge. Founded on August 16, 1807, with the name, quote, Towards the Dawn, kept in touch with the, quote, Grand Orient of France for a century. This trip was splendid, occasioned to carry out the intended enterprise. On the way, the messenger spent the night in a small town where a Russian agent was waiting for him with a group of scribes who took copies of the document overnight. The haste of such secret nights would work naturally to reflect on the incompleteness of the written off reports, which were filed in French. It is also very likely that the person who sold the secrets of his fellow tribesmen on the system of all as ifs always play on two fronts, could conceal an important part of the work of Congress in the text of, quote, protocols. We do not see any direct resolution on the nearest practically planned actions, but nevertheless, in their aggregate, the copies made gave a very complete program of revolutionary goals and revolutionary tactics, painted with a pure hatred for the Christian faith and the Christian world. Subsequently, in Wittenberg version was slightly modified. The protocols were written off not abroad in one of the cities lying on the road from Basel to Frankfurt, as previously assumed, but in Vernsbolov. When Noam Sokolov moved to the Russian border, in this version, the lady is also mysterious, but still, she was helped by agents of the police who carried out the technical tasks of their own. That is arranged so that in Sokolov was forced to stay for a few days, and Ver Bolov, but put him to sleep and gave the lady a copy of the protocols for so long that she could get a copy of them. Russian journalist M.O. Minshkikov contributed to the creation of a new version about the ways the protocols appeared in Russia. He told about his meeting with a secular lady who had the protocols. Meeting dates back to 1902. The quote protocols of this conspiracy and their interpretation was kept deep in secrecy. Quote, he wrote down from this lady's words, recently they have been hidden in nice longs chosen as the secret capital of Jewry. But such a frivolous age, these protocols have been stolen. They fell into the hands of a French journalist, and from him somehow to my uh, elegant hostess, and that she had translated the excerpts from previous documents in Russian with great haste, and thought that it would better to hand them over to me. Okay, so all right, I'm gonna stop here for now. Exactly. That's how I feel. I'm glad that you said that, really, because that's how we feel as true Orthodox Christians, And it's sad that they're in the kind of this position where they have to hate us. But what do you hate us for? What? Why are you saying these? You're schismatics, or what for holding on to the faith as it has always been passed down. We're not giving into modernism. We're not giving into these subversive ways of thought. And the reality they have to come to terms with is that Freemasonry has infiltrated their churches, right? And it's at the highest level. I mean, KGB agents and Freemasons, and this sounds like a conspiracy to people, but that's exactly what they want you to think it is. They want you to think it's just a conspiracy and there's no truth to it. No, it's absolutely true. Um, when you look at a person like Bartholomew, you'll look into him. He's a Freemason. You look into a person like Elpidodorus, clearly a Freemason. The one before him, Demetrius, he was a Freemason. So why is that? It goes all the way back to the 1920s with Meletius Motekis. He was a Freemason. So it gets to a point where, you know, the bishops are not speaking out, the priests aren't speaking out. We're in the times of the great apostasy. People are blinded by appearances, and they just can't come to terms with these things, you know. So um, I appreciate everything, and from everybody that's viewing, and I thank you for tuning in, and I hope you guys have a wonderful night. And I'll be taking a flight early in the morning to New Jersey, so I gotta go to sleep really. So I think yeah, everybody. I'm Unseen Warfare, and I'll come back with another episode on this, and we'll talk more. Okay, wait. I'll answer this question real quick. I have a question about Pharisee children who substitute God in the cross. I forget the scriptural verse. I don't really understand your question. Oh yeah, absolutely. You know what it is? It's crypto unitism. Or you know, like they're unions really, and they don't even realize it for the most part. Even their arguments are Roman Catholic arguments. You know, because the Roman Catholics said that you'd be a schismatic if you broke away from them, right? Uh, that's what they called Orthodox Christians. You know, every heretic in history that has taken over a hierarchy has called the Orthodox that broke away from them, you know, schismatics and heretics. They point the finger and confuse. And a lot of the times, the people that are, you know, the lady and I mean the you know the lady, the faithful in the church, they don't realize that they're being propagated with these type of arguments. Like, and you go and even try to talk about these subjects in their places. Like you go to one of these World Orthodox guys, like Discord or something, they'll put you in something called like cringe containment, you know, and they'll all attack you and just slander your name and call you names and all this stuff, really viciously for telling the truth. Um, I had a friend who went in there and he had a profile picture of Russia's catacomb saints. It's a book written by Saint Seraphim Rose, and it's not in print anymore because Platina is ashamed of what they've done by going in communion with the Serbs who are in communion with the Moscow Patriarchate, and they got a hold to a party line, so they can't push the book anymore. So what ends up happening is he goes in there, he has that as a profile picture, and they want to kick him out because of it. It's a book written by a saint, and you're supposed to be Orthodox Christians, and you're so ashamed of your jurisdictions that you can't even acknowledge it. And the book's about millions of Russian, you know, Orthodox who were killed by the Bolsheviks and you know the Soviet Church, and you're ashamed because you know the Catacomb Church is known as the true Orthodox Church of Russia. So, anyways, I appreciate everybody. Later. Thank you guys. All right, appreciate it. Later. Bless.